Welcome to the Coffee Clutch, a social gathering for good conversation around a cup of coffee. Now, today's old saying that I want to talk about is one that I really enjoy, and it says, "Better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt." And how many times have any one of us done exactly that? Offered an opinion or a thought and injected it into a conversation, and as it's coming out of your mouth, you think, wow, I wish I wasn't saying that. Most of us have had that experience before. Now, this old saying is really unknown where it comes from. It has been attributed to among a number of people, but in particular Abraham Lincoln and Mark Twain or Confucius, or sometimes you just see it written as anonymous. And I'm getting my information today from quoteinvestigator.com. There's also a notation down here that says there is a biblical proverb that expresses a similar idea, namely Proverbs chapter 17, verse 28. Here is the New International Version, followed by the King James Version of this verse. And it says, "A fool is thought wise if he keeps silent, and discerning if he holds his tongue." The other way of saying it was, "Even a fool, when he holdeth his peace, is counted wise, and he that shutteth his lips is esteemed as a man of understanding." Now, I find that really intriguing, because, of course, there's another old saying that says there's nothing new under the sun, and indeed there really isn't anything new under the sun. So you can attribute this saying to whomever you choose, but clearly it was an idea that is thousands of years old, and so with it we can assume there's a fair amount of wisdom that comes with this old saying. Now, my particular experience with this was when I was mayor, and while mayor of my community, and just a small Midwest community, we had a big development coming to town. And with that big development came a lot of meetings with a lot of people who knew what they were doing. And it was, I thought, pretty self-evident that I didn't. Now, one of the things I did was I made sure I had people around me that did know what they were doing, because I couldn't be expected to just suddenly negotiate a $50 million deal when I had never done anything like that. And yet I did become the lead negotiator for our team, and that was very, very interesting. Now, the gentleman who was the lead negotiator for the developer was a big man. He had a very distinct presence in a room. Everybody knew he was there when he was there. He was an interesting character. I liked him very much when it was all said and done. He wore very colorful suits. So I'd be sitting at a table, and there'd be maybe, well, depending on the meeting, but the one in particular that I'm thinking about, there were half a dozen or so gentlemen sitting there in their dark suits, which is very common, and then he was sitting there at the end of the table with this peacock blue suit on. Initially, I thought that was odd, but actually I came to really enjoy those suits. So at any rate, when we would have these meetings, I thought about this old saying quite a bit. I would just think, I'm going to sit here. I'm going to say as little as possible. I'm going to try and really pay attention to not only what they're saying, but how they're saying it, how they're communicating back and forth amongst themselves, because there is a lot of eye contact at any kind of meeting like that. I, of course, had an attorney with me, and I had an assistant with me, and they were both more knowledgeable. But I would sit there, and I was very quiet, as I mentioned. And the idea was, once everybody was gone, then whatever questions I might have, I would ask the attorney or the assistant, and then move forward in that fashion. And that pretty much became the routine. We would have meetings that could range anywhere from 2, 3, 4 people to 15 or 20 people. And regardless, I was pretty quiet. But I didn't even realize how quiet I must have been until one day when the developer looked at me, and amongst other complaints that he had, and this was a very volatile negotiation. I don't know, maybe all negotiations are volatile, but never having been a part of anything like this before, I couldn't tell you if it was the norm or not. Maybe some of you out there who are very accustomed to doing negotiating deals of different types are aware of how they go. Ours were volatile. I felt that the other side expressed themselves loudly. And so I tried to really kind of do just the opposite. And one day, as he was getting ready to leave, he looked at me and said, "I am sick and tired of you sitting there, saying nothing, acting like you don't know what's going on. I know you know what's going on." I'll never forget that, because I thought, he does think I know what's going on, which means if I know what's going on, he thinks I'm smarter than I think he thought I was when we started. Because I think when we began the negotiations, the only thing anybody knew about me was I was a stay-at-home mom with 8 kids. What could she possibly know? I remember when he said it, I just smiled. I didn't even respond to that comment because I really wasn't quite sure how to respond. But it was a really great lesson. It was a great lesson that when unsure of yourself, it's okay to remain quiet. I didn't have questions for him. I had questions for my team. And I learned so much sitting there and listening to them. I had the opportunity to see, like I said earlier, the way they interacted with each other and who was looking at who. And there was a lot of body language that was interpreted during those meetings, at least by me, or I thought I had. I guess when it was all said and done, the project was a success. And I think for both sides, to be perfectly honest, I think both sides got a lot of what it was they wanted. So I was proud of that. I was pleased with that. But this particular old saying really did help guide the way I responded and reacted in that situation. In our current climate for social correctness, I'm not exactly sure what the message is, because sometimes I feel like the message is we're not supposed to talk. Nobody talk, because if you talk and you say anything that might inadvertently hurt someone's feelings, then that's just hate language. The flip side, though, is I see people respond very rapidly and very angrily at somebody who says something that they don't like, and oftentimes not even with any kind of real thoughtful response, but rather just oftentimes foul words. I was watching something on YouTube, and some women walked through a crowd with their fingers up in the air. So what is that? What are you communicating other than you're not happy? But even a child can communicate that way. They can stomp their feet, which makes it very clear that for some reason they're unhappy. But it's important that we can actually communicate. So while this old saying tells us there's a wisdom in being quiet, it isn't telling us not to communicate. It's telling us to communicate carefully so that when we're ready to say something, when we have something to add, when we have an opinion, it's okay to share that. And we should be sharing it with each other. And some of the most fun conversations should be with your adversaries. You should be able to say, well, this is why I see things the way I do. And then they should be able to respond the way they see things. And maybe neither of you will change your mind. Or maybe you'll stop and think, that's a thought I hadn't considered. So while this old saying cautions you in how you communicate and when you communicate, don't confuse it with the idea that you should say nothing ever at all. We should be able to talk with each other. We should not be at screaming with each other simply because we do have different opinions. There are a lot of emotionally charged issues in our society currently. Lots of them, and I don't need to go through all of them. But they are also very important issues. We should discuss them. It should always be a red flag. I don't care who you are or what you believe, but there should always be a red flag if somebody tries to shut you down right away. They don't want to hear from you. They don't want to hear what you have to say. You feel confident that that's a red flag because we should be talking with each other. But sometimes we should be listening even more than speaking. I'd love to hear your comments or thoughts about situations you've been in where holding your tongue was the best idea. If you've liked this little tidbit of wisdom for today, I hope you like us. I hope you subscribe. It's been a lot of fun working through this YouTube station and getting involved in the YouTube world, and I hope you've enjoyed the different information you've listened to. So just remember the next time you're in a situation and maybe you don't feel terribly confident in what you have to offer to the conversation, it's okay. Remember, better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt. So until next time, enjoy that cup of coffee. Come back and visit.